Hey there, I'm Rich Bruck, and you've just tuned into Tuning Down for Terror. I've spent a lot of my life on the road, dive bars, theaters, backs of vans at 3 a.m., playing guitar and watching the world roll by at 70 miles an hour. Most of my stories are the usual road tales. Bad sound checks, worse hotel rooms, and the occasional bar fight, but some of them don't have explanations. And they're the ones that stick with you long after the amp's been turned off and the lights go down. So welcome. Grab your headphones, settle in, and let's tune down for terror. Because if the road has taught me anything, it's that the strangest gigs are the ones you never forget. Every musician knows that their tour van or gear trailer is basically their second home. And like any home, when something's wrong with it, well, you know it right away. We were driving a beat-up, windowless cargo van we'd nicknamed the Tank. It was reliable, ugly as sin, but reliable. But the back hatch, the big door where we loaded all the expensive equipment, was notoriously flaky. You had to slam it 3 times to get it to properly latch. And if you didn't, you'd be pulling over every 20 miles down the road to do it all over again. This was in the middle of a brutal 7-day stretch of one-nighters across the Midwest. We'd slam the hatch, drive for an hour, and then the little door ajar light on the dash would flicker on. Every single night, we'd pull over, slam it again, drive some more, and it would flicker again within the hour. We were convinced it was, a short in the sensor, or maybe a loose wire rubbing somewhere. A hassle, but not scary, just annoying. We lost maybe an hour a night dealing with this, but if it was just a sensor problem, why did it always happen at night, never during the day? On the 4th night after the light flickered on for the 3rd time in 2 hours, I pulled off the highway, some dark stretch of nowhere between Toledo and Cleveland, and went to the back myself. I unlocked the hatch, opened it, and slammed it shut with all my weight, listening for that solid click. I saw my reflection in the dark, dusty window, and I looked exhausted, hollow-eyed, but as I turned to walk away, I heard a clear, metallic snick. The unmistakable sound of a lock disengaging. I spun back around, and the hatch wasn't fully open, but it was unlatched. The seal was broken, maybe half an inch open, cold air seeping out. I distinctly remember the sound of the lock clicking open, not bouncing loose from vibration, but deliberately opening. If it was just a bad latch, it wouldn't make that sound. That's the sound of someone turning the handle from the inside. I checked the interior. My heart was pounding. Flashlight scanning every shadow. The van was packed tight. Every guitar case, every amp, every pedal board was exactly where we left it, strapped down and secure. Nothing was moved. Yet every time we drove, the hatch would unlatch itself. Only when we were moving, and only at night. The final straw came the next morning. We packed up for the final gig of the week. I opened the van expecting nothing unusual, just our gear, same as always. But sitting on top of my main touring amp, right in the center where you couldn't miss it, was a single brightly colored marble. Just one. A cheap, perfectly round blue marble with a white swirl inside. Still warm to touch. If it had been there all night in a cold van, it should have been freezing. The hatch locks from the inside, and there was absolutely no way that a marble could have rolled from the cab. There's a solid metal divider. It had to have been placed there, deliberately. And we drove a cargo van with no rear windows, no way in except through the locked cab or the locked hatch. I asked the guys if they'd put it there, maybe as a joke, and they swore they hadn't. No one had been in the back since we loaded it in the night before. So we finally looked up the history of the tank through the VIN number, and we found out that the previous owner used it to transport instruments for children's theater group in Michigan. The director's young son, who loved to play with marbles and ride in the back with the costumes, was killed in a roadside accident in the van while sitting by the back hatch. He was only 7, a kid who just wanted to play with the gear, who collected marbles and left them in the storage compartments. They found dozens of them when they cleared out the van after the accident. If you know what you're looking for, you can still see the small memorial sticker on the inside of the hatch. We just never noticed it before. We sold that van a month later. I still don't know why he wanted to open the door or why he left that marble. Maybe he just wanted to get out. Maybe he was still trying to ride along with the band, leaving little calling cards to let us know he was there. That marble's sitting on my desk right now. It reminds you that sometimes the places you travel hold the previous occupants, and sometimes they're just kids who want to come along for the ride. When we come back, I'll tell you about a quiet motel room and a very specific critique of my guitar playing in The Unwanted Lesson. Welcome back to Tuning Down for Terror. You've tuned in to the sounds of the open road, the lonely miles that give you time to think and sometimes time to worry. You know, when you're a gigging musician, a motel room isn't a place to relax. It's a place to crash. This was a classic rundown spot off an old interstate somewhere in Ohio. The kind with exterior doors and rust-stained sinks and an ice machine that sounds like a jackhammer at 3 a.m. We were broke, so I was solo in a double room using the second bed to stack gear. I'd hauled in my favorite old acoustic, the one I used for teaching my private students. The one that had heard hundreds of wrong notes and frustrated sighs. If instruments could absorb memories, this one had absorbed years' worth. It was late, maybe 1 a.m., but I was wired from the drive and the show. I sat on the edge of the bed and just decided to run through a few finger-picking exercises. I've been teaching a long time, and I often hear the ghost of my students' mistakes when I practice. Things like, keep your fingers down, Rich, or watch that third finger. Just muscle memory corrections echoing in my head, but this was different. This wasn't in my head. I was working on a tricky little chord change, something I'd actually been teaching a student just that week, when I heard it. A very soft, clear whisper right next to my ear. Close enough that I actually felt the breath. And it said, too flat. Well, I flinched so hard, I hit the wrong string, the sound jarring in the quiet room. I immediately spun around to look behind me, but nothing was there. The room was silent except for the hum of the ancient air conditioner and my own breathing. I told myself it was the ventilation fan or maybe just exhaustion playing tricks. The voice was too specific, and the correction was actually right. My hand had slipped a little on that chord. If I'd been imagining it, why would my imagination give me an accurate musical feedback? I started playing again, more deliberately this time, trying to prove to myself that it was nothing. I closed my eyes and focused on the strings and the familiar weight of the guitar. I played an old, simple thing that I teach all my beginner students, a basic C major sort of thing, the foundation of everything. And as soon as I finished, the whisper came back, but this time colder, raspier, and right over my shoulder. Close enough that the hairs on my neck stood up. It said, "Remember Liam." Well, I stopped completely, my fingers frozen on the fretboard. Liam was a private student that I taught maybe 10 years ago. A very talented kid, but shy, dedicated. But he quit suddenly after his parents moved away. And, we lost touch completely. I hadn't spoken his name out loud in years. Why would a random motel whisper mention his name? If someone was messing with me, how could they possibly know about a student from a decade ago? I stood up, guitar still in hand, and grabbed the motel issue phone, seriously considering calling the front desk or even just leaving entirely. But as I walked toward the window, I noticed something in the reflection of the glass. The second bed where my case-stacked gear was sitting in shadow. And on the empty pillow, perfectly etched into the dust and grime like someone had traced it with a careful finger, was the word E minor. That was the chord Liam could never get right. He struggled with it every single week for like 6 months straight, and we'd joke about it. How can E minor be such an easy chord and be your nemesis? I spun around, my heart was pounding. The room was empty. The door was locked, the chain still latched. But the dusty pillow and the memory of a student I hadn't thought about in a decade made the room feel unbearably small and close. It wasn't a monster, it was something worse, a critical ghost that somehow knew my lesson plan and my former student's greatest weakness. If it knew about Liam, what else did it know? What other memories from that guitar was it pulling from? I packed up and slept in the van that night. The doors locked, guitar in my arms. I never found out who or what was in that room, but I realized that my personal history isn't just mine. It's scattered out there like sheet music left behind in every room I've practiced, every note I've taught. And sometimes you find a listener who knows your songs better than you do. Someone who's been paying very close attention. And that's all for this episode of Tuning Down for Terror. Thank you for lending your ear, and be sure to subscribe and follow. And I'll be back next time with more true tales from the quietest parts of the road. And if you're a teacher, maybe think twice about where you're practicing. Good night.